Chapter 79.1 Duke Brudu City, Bayan, was nicknamed the Glory of the East. The vast, expansive East had many unexplored territories. There were only a few cities dating back to the ancient empire era. A little to the north, barbarians and pagans who mocked the name of the empire swarmed from all sides. Hence, it was natural for others in the empire to regard the East as barbaric. Bayan in the southern East was a city that defied such mockery. A beautiful and massive city dating back to the ancient empire era. Located at the foothills of the Dwarf Mountains and embracing the Durnal River branching from the Ipel River, this city had never fallen since the ancient empire era. Even when the ancient empire collapsed and numerous kingdoms and barbarians swept the surrounding areas. The centaur warriors smiled contentedly. Johan's expression, as he gazed at the city emerging in the distance, filled them with pride. Am I speaking correctly? That's quite fluent. Eastern language is quite difficult, isn't it? The centaur warriors shrugged their shoulders. They looked at Johan as if he was unusual. None of the knights from the empire bothered to learn the language known as Eastern. There was no need for the nobles of the East to learn a language used further east while speaking the language of the empire. Isn't it more difficult than the language of the empire? Well, maybe for you folks. In fact, there's only one thing to learn in Eastern language. What does that mean? While other centaurs tried to intervene in confusion, the centaur warrior grinned and explained. Roughly, it means, it's good to say this before a fight. I'll remember that. Despite the seemingly rude words, Johan chuckled and moved on. It was, after all, a useful phrase. Sir Knight. My name is a Cladder of the Alcia tribe. Please remember it. I'll remember. It's a pity I couldn't show my skills. Since the centaurs joined, surprisingly, no monsters were seen. Actually, it was rare to encounter monsters in the plains. There will be an opportunity soon. A Cladder's word sounded quite significant. As Johan was about to inquire about their meaning, he saw a large group setting up camp in the distant plains. With various banners and flags, hundreds of warriors and thousands of people were gathering. They were there to attend the investiture ceremony and to watch it. The orderly gathering of so many people in the field was a spectacle in itself. Sir Knight's honor is. Did you just curse at me? Of course not. Ha ha. Sir Knight. Please visit the Alcia tribe. Don't forget the name Cladder. With these words, Cladder raised his arm. The centaur warriors who had finished their escort duty raced ahead, heading towards their tribe. Be careful when dealing with the nobles of the empire, Cladder. Why is that? I quite like that knight. We got along well. There are such knights even among the people of the empire. Cladder spoke cheerfully. His manner of speaking fluently in Eastern language was a stark contrast to when he dealt with people from the empire. To the nomadic tribes of the East, the empire had always been a cautious adversary. This was also true for those who entered the fences of the empire. They had sworn allegiance as vassals to the duke, but at the same time, they never let down their guard. They were not dogs, but wolves. And wolves cannot be tamed. Do you know how annoying those empire folks are? If you meet them on the plains, they are the type to be shot in the neck with an arrow and die. There's some truth to that. You should not believe that the knight caught 3 werewolves. The braggadocio of those from the empire is quite serious, isn't it? His eyes didn't seem to be lying. Did you see the expressions of the soldiers behind him? Upon Cladder's words, the centaur warriors could not refute. A superior warrior subordinate always had a different expression. The soldiers genuinely revered Johan. In the upcoming appointment ceremony, I plan to show those from the empire who the real warriors are. Right. Do your best. The Alcia tribe was one of the renowned nomadic tribes nearby, and Cladder was the beloved youngest son of the chieftain. As such, Cladder inevitably heard information about the appointment ceremony. Duke Brudu was a wise man, and he knew well how useful the eastern nomadic tribes could be. This upcoming appointment ceremony was going to be an event for their pride. He's really handsome. Why is that? I was admiring how handsome the Duke is. Suit chuckled at Johan's words. Duke's appearance is famous even in the empire. How are you getting along with the centaurs? They were affable friends. You must have made them so. A great river accepts all streams without discriminating. Just like a great mountain accepts even the smallest clod of earth. Is there such a saying? That's also a good one. Duke Bredu dismounted quickly upon seeing the group. The people of the Japan family were moved by this gesture. Stephen felt the same. Chapter 80.1. If such words were spoken to other hot-blooded young knights, they would have been seething with anger. The investiture was more than just a ceremony for receiving knighthood. Of course, the title of knight was important, but young knights could not be satisfied with just that. They always wanted to be the most honorable and outstanding knight themselves. Once the Duke awarded the titles to the knights, congratulating them in the name of honor and glory, it was their chance to showcase their skills. That was precisely what the tournament was for. As long as you don't make a fool of yourself, it's fine, isn't it? Yes. It's an easy position if you just get rid of your pride. Being chosen as the most outstanding knight would spread one's fame in front of the Duke and the crowd, and their name would be known in the East for a while, but it was a poisoned chalice. In such group battles, it was necessary to have luck and connections, though it might be different in one-on-one combat. Except for not using edged weapons, everything else was like war, so not only individual valor but also tactics and strategy were important. In this aspect, knights from powerful families naturally had an advantage. The knights here had already entangled relationships in the name of their families before coming. They would move around those relationships even in the tournament. If it were the Erland's kingdom, it would have been better. Elven knights would have chased after you. Ah. Johann chuckled, but Suitlug was serious. I'm not joking. With my family and more formidable guys around, aren't you overestimating me? Knights aren't that sharp-witted. Oops. Sorry. It's okay to say helmet rack instead of head, feel free to speak your mind. Thanks. If they were as sharp-witted as you, I wouldn't be so frustrated. Knights just follow famous families and knights with high reputations. Do they also follow those who fight well? I'm serious. It wouldn't be strange for you to have knights following you. It wasn't unusual for other knights to follow a superior knight. In this camp, there were already several groups visible. But not just anyone could be such a knight. To lead knights as subordinates, one needed both reputation and funds, and also skill. No matter how great the family, a knight without skill was soon found out. Aren't there any now? Sir Marco? Those guys. Leave the process aside and just look at the result. They are following him, aren't they? If you say so. Suitlug was giving a compliment, and Johann wasn't the type to stubbornly refuse by saying no. Johann decided to accept it happily. Just don't get hurt. There's nothing more futile than dying in a tournament. Ha ha. I know. They might be fighting with blunt weapons, but everything else was like real combat. There were quite a few deaths. Of course, people didn't discourage it by saying. On the contrary, violence and bloodshed excited them. Was the cry of the spectators. From Johann's perspective, it seemed too much for people who weren't even participating. This is nonsense. Why are you so upset? These scoundrels, what do they think of the Abner family's name? Let it go. Johann stopped Stephen, who was getting as worked up as if it were his own matter. There was one reason. In a tournament where fighters were divided into two groups, Johann was assigned to the Eastern group, that is, a group with many barbarians. The Duke's Chancellor, Inspector, and scribes tried to mix in some knights, but ultimately, choosing which side to aim the spear at was a personal choice. Naturally, influences of friendships and family lineage were inevitable. So, naturally, the knights gathered in the West were from Western knightly families, those who consider themselves as part of the Empire, while those in the East were the opposite. Notable nomadic tribes from outside the Empire, barbarian families who had converted only a few generations ago, and even knightly families who had not converted were present. As a result, while most knights in the West were humans with a few elves mixed in, the knights in the East were a diverse mix of humans, centaurs, dwarfs, and their attire varied greatly. They must have found it difficult to place me in the East since I'm already familiar with the other guys. So Johann. If you tell me, I will go and protest. The people of the Japan family also looked stern. Even considering the knightly courtesies for friends, placing Johann from afar in the East was questionable. They could even appeal to the Duke in the name of the Japan family. It's really okay. I think it would be rude to the knights placed in the East to go and complain about it. Trying to build friendships and ending up making enemies. Ah, no. But still. Stephen blushed, realizing he hadn't considered that perspective. Stephen and the Japan family members were all people of the empire. To them, the knights were part of the Western group, not the East. And Stephen, go easy with the name of the Abner family. If Ulrika comes after you, you'll have to fend her off yourself. I've changed too. Of course, I was careful. Stephen grumbled, but Johann didn't believe him and asked Marco. How was it? Chapter 80.2. Huh? No. You can speak freely. Were you quite modest? Why the doubt? Anyway, got it. Marco, looking awkward, tried to change the subject. How was the investiture? It's not the first time talking to the Duke, just felt like he was giving stuff away. Marco was surprised by the much more indifferent response than he had expected. He, as a bastard, had been so excited about his own investiture ceremony that he couldn't sleep. He vividly remembered bathing and praying all night in the temple. What did you receive? A sword, a cloak, and a belt. Considering what he received, he wondered if it was worth the long journey, but the significance was not light. The name and lineage of the Duke were represented in these items. Have you thought about fighting under the Duke? I haven't even thought about it yet. It wouldn't be a bad choice to work under the Duke and aim for a fief, now that he had a title. But Johann still found this land unfamiliar. The western part of the empire was at least not too far from where Johann grew up, but this place felt completely different. For now, he thought to wait until the tournament was over. Jeffrey. I'm counting on you. Yes. Just leave it to me. If things look bad, he'll give the command, so don't worry. In the arena, it was the role of servants or slaves to carry out a fallen knight. Jeffrey, aware of this, had a tense expression. Johann lightly checked his thoughts and drove his horse towards the knights in the east. Already, more than a dozen knights had finished preparing and were waiting in formation. There was nothing particularly special. Losing armor and weapons was painful, but none of the knights present for the investiture ceremony would die without them. Instead, one had to worry about their life. A wrong hit and a broken neck meant death for Johann as well. Sir Knight. Have you come searching for the Alcia tribe as requested? A playful voice was heard from the front. Aklada stood in the center of the group, waving his hand with a pleased expression. I thought you would stand with the West since you came from there, unexpected, isn't it? I came here because I like you more. Did you hear? This Sir Knight is such a person. Aklada burst into laughter. Other knights also looked at him favorably. What weapon does Sir Knight use best? Not sure. I seem to manage with a sword. What are you saying? Even though you are a knight? Aklada laughed until tears formed. It was too funny for him. He had never seen an Empire Knight talk like that. And you? I am best with a bow. Of course, I'm not bad with a spear either, but Euclia here is better with it. Say hello. Aklada's cousin, Euclia, had muscles that could be felt even through the armor gaps. It was natural for centaurs to be larger than humans, but Euclia was especially tall among them. Her spear seemed half longer than others. She looked troubled and hesitated to speak. Johann was puzzled. Didn't she want to talk with a human knight from the Empire? He understands the Eastern tongue, so feel free to speak. Ah. Hello, Sir Knight. Pleased to meet you. I look forward to seeing your spear skills. Ah, no. It's really nothing special. So I hope you don't expect too much. Spear skills are ultimately. Let's leave it at that. You're giving it all away. Aklada slapped his cousin's shoulder and said, It's a pity that you can use a bow, but what can we do? The Empire desires it, so we must adapt. To receive one, one must give one, right? I see. Wait. What do you mean by receiving one? By the way, Sir Knight, what role do you want in this fight? I, Aklada, will help you get it. Is that possible? Yes, of course. Johann was secretly surprised. It meant Aklada was qualified to be a commander among these Eastern Knights. Was he from a more impressive family than expected? I have no special desires. Besides, you all have more experience fighting together, right? Just place me somewhere comfortable and I'll fight my best. Aklada's expression became more curious. The more he looked, the more fascinating it was. He just didn't seem like an Empire Knight. Sir Knight, do you know you're the most peculiar Empire person I've ever met? And you're the most peculiar centaur I've met. Besides me, which tribe have you met? Ah, ha ha. I see what you mean. I understand. I'll place you somewhere comfortable. Crowds filled the vast stadium, swarming in such numbers that they packed the area, while the knights lined up orderly from end to end. The sight of over dozens of armed knights looking for an opportunity to charge, facing each other, was magnificent. Despite the noise outside, a chilling tension was palpable. Trumpets and shouts. A fitting response to them. Before reality could sink in, the knights on both sides charged at each other. Johann felt an instinctual cry within. Instinct was shouting within Johann. To crush the skulls and break the necks of those in front. Johann slowed his horse, calming his instincts. The first clash was already nearing its end. As the thick dust settled, knights who had been thrown off their horses were visible, swearing and swinging their weapons at each other. Some were immobile, some writhed, and some struggled to escape. The crowd viciously shouted for more fighting, yelling at the knights, whom they would normally not dare to address, too. The Duke revealed a hint of interest in his expression. Even amidst this fierce battle, there were some knights who had not joined the fight. They had been unable to find their place in the chaotic charge. However, once these knights grasped the situation, they quickly turned their horses and joined the fray. But Johann stood quietly in the middle of the battlefield, as if he had come there alone, with a calm expression. Not engaging in the nearby battles, he waited with his spear, his demeanor inexplicably serene and composed. Even though the Duke couldn't see Johann's expression, he strangely felt its impact. For honor. A knight, spotting Johann, charged at him. His lance seemed to have broken earlier, as he had drawn his sword. Johann aimed his spear at the opponent's shield. The corners of the opposing knight's mouth rose in a confident smile. It was a confidence that he could withstand such an impact. Cough! With the collision, the knight was sent flying. Johann, shaking off the tingling in his hand, threw the shattered spear aside. The opponent, having absorbed the full impact, couldn't even rise from the ground. Sir Bariska! How dare this man? Avenge Sir Bariska! Apparently a knight of some renown, the nearby knights fiercely attacked. Johann sensed that things were unfolding differently than he had expected. Chapter 81.1. I, too, underestimated the situation, as did Suitlignim. The tournament was not a place to casually adjust one's strength and show off. It was a battlefield where notable foes attacked each other on sight. To survive, one had to defeat the oncoming opponents, and defeating them inevitably drew attention. Yelska of the Jamati family. Johann of Yates. Come. Yelska spurred her horse, her long hair flying. Her eyes were filled with anger, but her movements were steady. She, too, seemed like an experienced knight. Be careful of him. He's the one who defeated Sir Bariska. I know. Ordinary knights, while charging on horseback, did not thrust their spears straight ahead, but diagonally, fearing the impact and subsequent collision. However, Johann thrust directly forward. Whether it was due to lack of experience or true confidence in his strength, Johann ultimately won, and Bariska fell. Bariska of the Petrio family was a well-known knight in this area, and they were knights who followed him. Johann was unaware of this. The two knights split to either side, aiming to attack Johann. It was clear they could read each other's intentions. In this tournament, where fighting with blunted weapons, unconventional methods were necessary to defeat an opponent. Unhorsing them, removing their helmet, breaking their weapons. The knights targeting Johann seemed to aim for both unhorsing and helmet removal, attacking fiercely from above. Johann, putting his weight on the saddle, deftly withstood the attack. In mounted combat, quick judgment and horsemanship were more important than excellent swordsmanship. The two knights, failing to finish in one strike, turned their horses again. That's when Johann counterattacked. Johann, barely breathing, swung his weapon. The two could not synchronize their attack every time. Johann first struck at the torso of the knight who charged first. Once. Twice. Thrice. On the third strike, the knight was unhorsed. Despite blocking the attacks with his shield, Yelska was astonished by the strength that shattered his opponent. But the fight was not over. Johann, strapping his shield to his arm, grabbed Yelska's arm and swung her off her horse. Another unhorsing. Cheers erupted from the stands. To the audience, it appeared as though Johann had defeated two knights at once. Johann of Yates. The troll slayer of Marseille. It was natural for the name of a knight who performed well to spread quickly. Moreover, the mercenaries following Johann excitedly touted his skills. Duke, impressive! To recognize the skill of a new knight at a glance. I couldn't even guess. If you want to know how great that knight is, look at his burning soul. No adornment can hide the soul. Duke Brudu's words left his children in awe. Of course, the Duke was inwardly surprised. Unlike other nobles, Count Jarpen was not the type to make recommendations based on lineage and connections. It was clear he sent someone truly worthy to this eastern region. Duke touched his forehead. He hadn't made a blatant mistake, but he was reflecting on his own judgment. Sir Lucas is doing well, Duke. Yes, I'm watching. As the initial clash and melee almost ended, the prowess of skilled knights became noticeable. Several knights had already knocked down many and were breaking through the formation. Knights from the west were in a slightly more advantageous situation. The knights from the east, on closer inspection, were mostly warriors from outside the empire, many of whom were quite different from the empire-style knights. They preferred lighter armor over heavy metal armor, agile and enduring horses over bulky, muscular ones, and lived by their own customs rather than faith and honor. Naturally, they were at a disadvantage in such empire-style tournaments. Nonetheless, knights from the east also made their presence felt. The Duke hoped that they would perform well, or if they lost, they would lose honorably. He watched the unfolding situation with a sharp gaze. If the situation turned too unfavorable for the Eastern Knights, the Duke planned to declare the fight over in his name. Oh. It might end more comfortably than expected. After toppling 3 knights, no one else dared to attack. Partly because they were too busy focusing on their surroundings, but also because they were wary of Johann. The enemies did not specifically target Johann, who was standing still. The knights engaged in several small skirmishes, getting entangled and separating repeatedly. Thanks to this, the space around them grew more open, giving Johann, who was waiting at a distance, some breathing room. Dash! It's the commander, capture him! If we take down the commander, victory will be ours. Johann lifted his head. Western knights who had broken through the formation were aggressively attacking Aklada. Aklada, true to his centaur nature, dodged the enemies by jumping here and there, but the knights were relentless, chasing him persistently. As the battle reached its midpoint, if the commander were to be unseated or surrender, it was highly likely that the Duke would declare the end of the fight. Surprisingly, the audience cheered for Aklada. Even those who usually disliked centaurs had to acknowledge his honor in this situation. The sight of more than 5 knights desperately attacking a single person was not considered honorable for knights, perhaps in war, but not here. Why don't you surrender already, centaur? If I had my bow, these humans would have been dead long ago. What about it, why not try one-on-one? The knights' expressions wavered when hit with a painful truth. They believed they couldn't beat Aklada one-on-one. The knights, who would need a lifetime of riding to achieve unity with their horse, were no match for the centaurs who were born with this unity. Euclia, Aklada's cousin, joined the fray with a wild eastern war cry, wielding a spear. Just as the tide seemed to turn, 3 more knights rushed in to block his cousin. Aklada exclaimed in a hollow voice. Do you have no pride or honor? The very people who called me a savage are acting just like that. Shut up, you cursed wretch! How dare a centaur speak? Aklada's taunts clearly ignited the knights' anger. They attacked ferociously, indicating the fight was far from over and bloodshed seemed imminent. The Duke frowned, his hand already gripping his sword. Drawing the sword would signify the end of the fight. And that's when Johann stepped in. Chapter 81.2. Strangely, I found myself thinking of the elf knights. They were annoying when we were together, but now that we're apart, they somehow seem like decent fellows. Actually, they might have been decent. If it were them, they would have insisted on one-on-one even in that situation. A knight is supposed to be honorable, but if every knight were honorable, why would an honorable knight be praised? Honor is not easy to uphold. Everyone says it must be maintained, but only a few can actually do so, and that's what makes it great. The knights attacking me now were like that too. Johann actually felt a sense of kinship with them. Ah, these knight dastards here are human too. They act just like me in a pinch, despite what they say. But then, Johann's eyes met Aklada's. Aklada didn't speak, but his proud eyes conveyed a strong message to Johann. It was a plea for help. Getting involved now wouldn't result in a good relationship with the Western Knight dastards after it's all over, but Johann decided he would side with the Centaur Knights. He didn't know which side would benefit more. It could even be a loss. But honestly, he found the Centaurs more likable than the Knight dastards. Gasp! As Johann charged forward, shouting in Eastern language that he would kill their parents and children and bury them together, a cladder stumbled and almost fell. It was truly a first-time experience. What did he say? A knight from the Empire speaking Eastern language. Those nearby who had fallen off their horses or were scattered laughed uproariously at the sudden use of Eastern language. Only the Western knights were confused. But Eastern language was just the beginning. If you are a knight, fight one-on-one. Shut. Johann swung his sword at the helmet of the most unfortunate knight in front. Sparks flew as the knight rolled to the side. Next was another knight's shield. Striking with full force, the enemy fell from his horse as the sword finally broke. Catch! The knight, thinking he saw an opening, eagerly tried to mount his horse, but Johann approached first. The knight was taken aback by Johann charging at him unarmed. Johann snatched the mace from the knight's hand. Confused at having his weapon taken, the knight looked at Johann, who responded with the mace. In an instant, three were rolling on the ground. Johann joined Euclia with a war cry. The opposing knight, witnessing all this, showed remarkable judgment. He turned his horse and fled. Even though fleeing the scene was a shameful and dishonorable act for a knight. Such was the fear Johann's presence instilled. Loud jeers followed the fleeing knight, and Johann mercilessly struck down the knights who didn't flee. No knight, even with a shield, could maintain balance after several hits from Johann, especially on horseback. Speak slowly, I can't understand when you say it like that. Responding to the excited Centaur knightess, Johann turned his horse. The knights attacking a cladder were distracted and unaware of the situation behind them. Only when Johann joined them with a demonic face did they turn at the urgent cries. Aha! A knight fell off his horse in a rather absurd manner without even being hit. It was a result of sheer panic, losing grip on the reins and tumbling to the side. The audience burst into laughter, almost losing their minds in the uproar. Stephen thought to himself. While the onlookers were laughing, it was indeed a situation where falling off the horse wouldn't have been surprising. Johann's momentum had something beyond just a knight's prowess. It seems you're delighted with Sir Johann's performance. Ah. Of course, indeed. Sir Johann has taken down another one. The excitement reached its peak. Johann, entangled with the knights, took a few hits while charging in. He absorbed the impact on his back and shoulders, enduring it with his muscles. He certainly reaped the rewards. Though the attacks were exchanged, Johann was the only one standing. Damn it! Is Sir Knight even human? Look ahead, you fool! Ha ha! I'm watching! A cladder cheered and swung his spear. Johann had unseated all the other knights, but left the leader-like figure alone. It was Lucas of the Laccio family. Even though Johann could have taken him down, he yielded to a cladder, prompting the audience to cry out. This honorable conduct, so different from the knights in the West who attacked in groups, set the crowd ablaze. Johann shouted in Eastern tongue. Do you wish for assistance from behind? No, I'm fine. A cladder shouted back, sweating. He was tired from continuous combat, and Sir Lucas was no easy opponent. Lucas' horse, particularly exhausted, was panting heavily. A cladder, more aware of Lucas' horse than Lucas himself. Although he might have been inferior to Lucas in pure weapon skill. Instead of clashing swords, a cladder collided with Lucas' horse. The horse neighed and toppled to the side. Sorry, you're an honorable companion. A cladder apologized to the horse in Eastern tongue and quickly pointed his sword at Sir Lucas' throat. Lucas, trying to pick up his dropped weapon, resigned with a look of defeat. I've lost. Eastern knights, still energetic enough to yell, raised their weapons high in the air. It was a clear victory. Chapter 82.1. As soon as the outcome was decided, the Duke realized he was gripping his sword tightly. His palms were sweaty. He had been watching so intently. As a ruler, one must coldly orchestrate tournaments to derive political gains. Getting lost in the excitement of such tournaments was something ordinary people did, not the Duke. Duke, reflecting on this, quickly spoke up. The contest ends here. I will not allow any further duels in the name of Bridu. Serfs, servants, and slaves, go inside and bring out your masters. Bless the knights who fought honorably." The audience responded with applause and cheers, grateful for the Duke's generosity in hosting such an event. It was said that a well-conducted tournament could bring peace to the region for years. Such was the event's impact in establishing the host's authority and captivating the people. Now, only one thing remained. It was time to choose the tournament's winner. The bishop and abbot seated next to the Duke made the sign of the cross before speaking. "It must be hard to choose. He doesn't have such a sense, does he?" Originally, it was customary for the winner to be the commander of the victorious side. An Acladar of the Alsia tribe was more than qualified to receive it. Even Lucas of the West had brought down his opponents and won the victory himself. The problem was that there was another knight who had made a significant impact in the tournament. Johann of the Yates family. Although he did not actively fight in the tournament, the majesty he displayed was unmatched by anyone. His charge with the lance, knocking down knights and saving Acladar, was truly remarkable. Because of this, he was already extremely popular among the crowd, even though he was not originally a knight active in the East. Even the Duke was surprised by this. At this rate, if Johann does not become the winner, there could be dissatisfaction among the crowd. I have heard from the Bishop of Mosho that Sir Johann of the Yates family is a paragon of devotion among knights. Seeing him today, I realized that these words were not mistaken. The Duke was shocked at the bishop's words. He knew Johann was young and talented, but he hadn't expected such praise from the bishop. Normally, the church despised such barbaric events as tournaments, where many died despite precautions. Such a reaction, instead of a typical sermon? God loves a loyal knight. Despite the surprise, the Duke made up his mind. If Acladar, from the victorious Eastern Knights, didn't receive the honor, the Alsia tribe might be displeased. So much effort had been made to appease the nomadic tribes, he couldn't just stand by. There might be discontent, but Acladar as the winner wasn't an unreasonable outcome. It would settle soon. Duke stewards came looking for Johann. Johann was taking a break, chatting with others. "So Johann, you have been bestowed the honorable glory of this competition." Johann was puzzled by this. He had thought Acladar would receive it due to customs. "Sir Knight, congratulations. Did you say something behind my back?" "What? No, why would you think that? How could I possibly do that?" Although Acladar feigned ignorance, he was unaware of Johann's understanding. Johann was not merely a knight of physical strength, he possessed a mind capable of realistic assessments in such situations. "Well, your tribe seems quite remarkable, and you are an outstanding warrior, so I thought you might have yielded to me, thinking you owe me." "I'm sorry, Sir Knight. I underestimated and insulted you." Court, Acladar gave up and apologized, knowing it would only strain their relationship further. "No. If you yielded, I should be thankful. Why talk of underestimation and insult?" I assumed without speaking. Acladar worried Johann might be angry, but this too was a misconception. "You must have thought that if you told me, I might refuse or take it as an insult." "I appreciate your consideration. But are you really fine with not accepting it? It might mean a lot to you, although I'm not from here." "It's fine. Other honors await me." Johann was perplexed but accepted the offer, not wanting to keep the Duke waiting. The sound of trumpets and some unknown instruments could be heard, and only after the Duke's servants and stewards shouted Johann's name and bravery until their throats were sore, Johann could reach in front of the Duke across the arena. Johann knelt respectfully in front of the Duke. The Duke's children beside him caught his eye. Johann was surprised. The reason was the unreal appearance of Duke's children. Their silver hair and pale, beautiful features resembled Duke, but all of their faces looked alike as if they were twins. Their appearance, indistinguishable between males and females, seemed like a fantasy. It seemed understandable why Duke's children were called stars of Bridu. They looked so alike. "So Johann, I am pleased to bestow upon you the highest honor of this contest. In the West, the most beautiful and noble person would have presented this sword, but..." Laughter erupted around the Duke's joke. In the East, it is the law that a warrior must give the sword to another warrior. "I bestow this sword upon you for the honor and bravery you showed today." The sword the Duke offered was a famous blade with a silver edge. It wasn't as great as Johann's, passed down from ancient empire times, but it was still a remarkable sword. Envious and admiring gasps were heard around. Johann respectfully received the sword. He could feel the Duke's children staring intently at him. Other knights present must have some relationship with the Duke's children, being nobles active in the East. But not Johann. Suddenly, a large stone rolled in, and from the children's perspective, they must have wondered. After Johann left, the Duke stood up and surveyed the gathered crowd. Now that the tournament had ended, it was time for the feast. Everyone was filled with anticipation for the drinks and food to be generously provided by the Duke. However, the Duke had another plan in mind. Now that this honorable contest is over, a feast should follow for everyone. But it is too early to relax. There is another contest for the warriors gathered here. Chapter 82.2. The crowd started murmuring. Usually, a feast followed the tournament, but there was more. Were they talking about a one-on-one horseback fight? Or archery? Or maybe it's a hunt. Since old times, hunting was the best event to prove a warrior's prowess. Of course, the honor was far from the hunters hunting, waiting with traps. A true warrior should end the prey's life with his own martial skills. And another thing was Johann himself. If the hunting target was a deer, it would be a noble leisure activity; if a wild boar, a fight for training and honor for young knights. If it were a rabbit, it would be too embarrassing to even speak of. From this crescent moon to the next, the greatest honor will be bestowed upon the knight who brings back the most formidable monster. Until then, let the knights enjoy feasting and merrymaking in gratitude for the bounty. A roar like thunder erupted again. It was the loudest cheer of the day. People admired the Duke's generosity and breadth, buzzing about the upcoming hunt. Every face was filled with anticipation. However, the faces of the knights who would participate were serious. Most of the knights were unaware of this event. It was natural to be bewildered by the sudden need to hunt nearby monsters. Moreover, this custom was this a custom of those barbarians? Keep your voice down, sir. Moreover, hunting is a common practice in the Empire. No, I must speak my mind. Hunting in the Empire? Where else do they hunt like this? Awarding glory to those who bring back the most impressive game is something those barbarians do. The native families of the East naturally knew somewhat about the customs of the nomadic tribes. Bringing back the most impressive game to honor and celebrate is their custom. Anyone with a head would understand the Duke's intention. The Duke was blatantly appeasing the nomadic tribes. We already conceded in the tournament, and now we have to yield to them again. Then why didn't you fight better in the tournament? How dare you? You lack confidence in hunting, so you'll draw your weapon here. Go ahead. Let's see how well an Empire Knight dastard fights. I'm curious to see how well you fight and whether you'll disobey your master's command. There was commotion and growling everywhere. It took the Duke's soldiers rushing over and warning to calm things down. Interesting concept. No wonder the centaurs were speaking so meaningfully. The centaurs had left, and only Johann and his companions remained in the tent. They needed to leave at dawn, so they had to plan as much as possible before then. In fact, the most disadvantaged here was Johann, who was the least familiar with the geography. Moreover, this hunt was it too much to go alone without any servants or escorts. If they were going to side with the nomadic tribes anyway, it's better to do so decisively. If allowed, knights from the Empire would have swarmed in dozens. Besides, the justification plausible. A true knight must hunt alone. No knight could argue against this. It was good to show kindness to the centaurs. The Duke must see value in being kind to them. At Sinerna's words, Suetig nodded. Johann asked them, "Can you help in any way?" "That's unlikely. What capabilities do we have? Besides, it wouldn't be possible. We were already invited before you came. While you hunt, we'll likely be roaming around here. Whether it's me, this wizard, Stephen, or Marco. Please tell me Sir Gerdolf wasn't invited." Of course, Sir Gerdolf was invited too. "I will do well, sire." "Right, just nod and keep your mouth shut." People from various houses had been sent even before Johann's return. These were houses that wanted to establish a connection with Johann, the knight, not just the Abner and Jarpen families. Naturally, Suetlig and Sinerna were among the first to be invited. Being famous wizards from the Empire and not entangled with other noble families made them easier guests. Of course, knights like Stephen and Marco were also invited. Despite concerns about their families, it was still worth trying to form a connection first. Hearing this, Johann thought to himself. Johann, already honored enough at the tournament, unlike other knights, didn't need to stake his life here. If he could enjoy the eastern rivers, plains, and beautiful nature, and then receive some hospitality in the town before returning. You seem troubled, can I offer any help? As if dismissing Marcos' ignorance, Sinerna replied. He must be pondering his prey. Rash advice is meaningless. A knight must choose his own quarry. Chapter 83.1.2. But Johann's plan went awry from the beginning. A cladder came to Johann's tent. Did you have a good rest, Sir Knight? You must be more tired than I am. Ha ha. I could run 3 days and 3 nights without trouble. From the way you fought, it didn't seem like that. So, did you know about this hunt? I had my suspicions. The Duke had hinted at it to the chieftain. Johann nodded. He had guessed as much from a cladder's behavior, which had been overly significant. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, Sir Knight. No. Why worry about that? Such things shouldn't be said out loud. Hearing Eastern speech from behind, Johann realized a cladder hadn't come alone. Euclia, his cousin, appeared behind him. I'm really grateful for your help last time. She say your fighting was like that of Tingri. Can't you tone it down a bit? Let me speak too. I told you to learn Empire language. A cladder grumbled. It was frustrating to come all this way only to interpret. Euclia looked dejected and nodded. Shouldn't you go in and rest, with us leaving tomorrow? Ha ha. Before we leave tomorrow, I have a proposition. Won't you join us? Johann was surprised by the unexpected offer. He hadn't thought of it. Isn't it a rule to go alone? You're too honorable, Sir Knight. Perhaps that's why you didn't consider it. No. Johann was incredulous to hear. He wanted to object, but a cladder continued. Of course, the Duke said not to bring servants, slaves, or attendants. One must leave alone. But what's to stop those who leave alone from meeting and traveling together? Now that I hear it, a cladder was right. It was quite plausible for knights to stick together and move as a group. There was no reason to deliberately suffer losses when they weren't breaking any rules. Thinking about how they moved together during the tournament made it seem even more plausible. You were really planning to move alone? Sir Knight is truly remarkable. Among the knights I've met, few are as honorable as Sir Knight. A cladder expressed pure admiration. Among the knights of the Empire he had met in the East, none failed to mention honor. However, truly honorable knights were rare. They all easily go back on their words according to their interests. I was planning to move alone. A cladder hadn't considered that Johann might be planning to rest nearby and return after the hunt. If Sir Knight doesn't dislike, despise, or avoid us, it would be an honor to join you. You don't dislike, despise, or avoid us, do you? That's a bit of a sly way to put it. Ha ha. Please understand that as a sign of how much I want to join. Besides, you won't be at a loss, Sir Knight. The plains, mountains, rivers, and valleys nearby, all these places are under our control. The Empire's knights are familiar with them, but they're like sheep, always going to the same places. It was a remark that would have irked the knights, but Johann was unfazed. A cladder's offer was also appealing. One of the reasons Johann had been reluctant to step forward was his lack of knowledge about the geography. The Duke had given him ample time, but it was not enough to decide on a monster, gather rumors, and pursue it. He should have been aware of these things in advance. All right. Thanks for the offer. Let's go together. Really? That's great. You won't regret it. A cladder smiled innocently and was delighted. He seemed not much older than Johann, so his lively attitude suited him well. That's a bit burdensome to say. It might be better not to convey that. You're asking because you don't know? No. Don't ask me, ask the other adults around. Johann resolved to learn the Eastern language as quickly as possible. As dawn broke, the sound of trumpets and bugles faded away as the knights began to depart one by one. However, Johann, now enlightened with the truth, saw something different. He sensed an agreement among them, exchanging glances and waving hands, as if planning to regroup at a certain point. Surprisingly, even knights from the Empire and those from the tribes outside the Empire were seen exchanging looks. Johann realized the situation. Not all knights of the Empire were hostile towards barbarians or nomadic tribes. There were neutrals and those willing to cooperate given the opportunity. If there were connections, it made sense to join hands. The unexplored territories to the east were better known to these external tribes. Those who didn't ally would fall behind. Chapter 83.2. When Johann shared his conjecture, Aklada nodded in surprise. Johann's theory seemed plausible. It was more surprising that a knight, new to the area, had grasped the Duke's intentions. That could be true. The Duke Bredu is capable of that. What do you think of the Duke? He's a chief who understands us well. He gives as much as we offer. Aklada's words reflected satisfaction and trust in the Duke, who had been implementing conciliatory policies towards the nomadic tribes. But still, he is of the Empire. Our tribe wouldn't have thought of such a strategy. Creating advantageous situations for the external tribes and inducing harmony by having Empire Knights join them was a clever strategy. Not participating meant a loss. Johann saw this as a refined approach, but wondered what the issue was. Why is that? Well, if I were in charge, I wouldn't help the arrogant knight dastards just because they ask for it. Other warriors probably think the same. But some seem to have already joined hands. Aklada chuckled at Johann's comment, sending shivers down his spine. Don't think they have really joined hands, Sir Knight. Empire people may trust oaths, but we don't. We first see if the other is a warrior worth respecting. If the counterpart wasn't worthy of respect, any promise made with them meant nothing, regardless of oaths or honor. It was uncertain how sincere the warriors who joined hands with the Empire Knights were. Betrayal and disappearance at any moment wouldn't be surprising. It's interesting to hear about such customs, but it makes me uneasy to hear this now when we've agreed to move together. Don't worry, Sir Knight. I wouldn't have invited you to visit our tribe if I didn't respect you. Aklada wouldn't have made such an offer to someone he didn't respect. As Aklada enthusiastically chatted, several warriors gathered around. They were familiar with Aklada or related to his tribe. They, too, had participated in the tournament in the east and were very pleased to see Johann. Didn't expect the Troll Slayer to be here. I already feel like we're winning. Among the gathered, chatting crowd, Johann suddenly realized he hadn't asked the most important thing. So why have we gathered like this? What are we trying to catch? Well. Aklada. You haven't told him yet? What did the Sir believe in to follow you? Did he just come along without knowing? What if he leaves after hearing it? Nonsense. Would such a warrior back down? I see. I misspoke. As the warriors became noisy, Aklada signaled for them to quiet down. Sir Knight. I apologize. I forgot the most important thing. But why didn't you ask, Sir Knight? I trust you, that's why. Do you think he'll be moved by what you said? Although he said that, Aklada looked very happy. As the personnel gathered, he shouted. Now, gathered warriors, rough and tenacious warriors, fierce like untamable lions, warriors with fire in their eyes and light on their faces. Let's go on a hunt so grand that Bredu will be breathless with awe. Let's show who owns this plain. To the arrogant Empire folks. Aklada. Sir Knight is also here. Not to that Sir Knight, but to the arrogant Empire folks, let's show who owns this plain. Let's go. To catch the leader of the werewolves. The gathered warriors in front of the forest raised their weapons, responding to Aklada's call. Werewolf King. That was the goal of all the warriors gathered here. The centaurs and humans rode out through the forest, all but Johann familiar with the area and able to navigate the paths even with their eyes closed. The warriors, considering Johann, placed him in the middle of the group, but surprisingly, Johann kept up without falling behind. So Johann, have you often ridden through the forest? Riding a horse in the forest required more than instinct and intuition, it needed experience and technique. Signals from the elements of the forest. The shape of the extended path and the direction of the branches. The appearance of leaves and piled earth. To decipher where to steer based on these things, experience was required. And Johann's mentor in the forest was Joseph. A ranger from the east. Johann suddenly realized that Joseph was from the east. What he had said was also useful in the east. Euclia, who had approached thinking she might help Johann if he fell behind, exclaimed. Like a snail, fast and cool. Maybe speaking in Eastern dialect would be better. Euclia blushed and nodded her head. Since she wanted to become more familiar with the Eastern dialect, it was better to converse in it. Sir Knight. Recently, there have been more werewolves. Claddagh said, casually flicking his bowstring. The arrow in Claddag's hand was unique compared to the others. It was much shorter and sharper. They're not the kind with no heads that would overrun a town, but their numbers have increased that much. The monsters, with diminishing prey, became more aggressive and active. Werewolves knew attacking towns was dangerous. Yet, their attacks implied one reason. There might be several reasons for the increase of werewolves, but our tribe's shamans, as well as other tribes, have made the same prophecy. There must be a leader among the werewolves. Werewolves typically didn't group much, often fighting for dominance within their own kind. However, occasionally, a strong werewolf, having survived long enough, would subdue others and form a pack. With a strong leader, the werewolf pack, more organized, would last longer. Especially if these fierce monsters moved in an orderly fashion. We were going to report to the Duke and ask for soldiers, but given the situation, we decided it's better to handle it ourselves. Wouldn't it be an honor? So, how do you plan to catch them? With this, of course. Claddagh held up his bow and arrow. Despite a regular bow and arrow being less effective against monsters, his confidence was evident. As you must know, having caught a troll, what's most important in hunting a monster? A way to ensure cutting off its breath. Exactly. Claddagh smiled slyly. He thought Johann shared his perspective. A deadly poison strong enough to cut off a werewolf's breath. I've prepared such a poison. You must have it too, Sir Knight, for when you caught the troll. Ah. Oh? Did you catch it with fire? Chapter 84.1. It was rare to catch a troll with fire around here. Despite their reputation for being dull, this troll was a quick and cunning monster. It would either deftly avoid or try to extinguish any fire. To land a proper hit with fire despite such evasion required special vision or skills. No. So, that's... What is it? Please tell us how you caught it. Don't worry, Sir Knight. We are not fools who would insult Sir Knight for not fighting one-on-one fairly. At Claddag's words, the other warriors also nodded in agreement, laughing. However, they had no idea what Johann was about to say. Johann explained the events as convincingly as possible. The warriors, initially listening with great interest, gradually made more bizarre expressions. You tore off the troll's arm and beheaded it. Is that really a human? This knight might have been born with the soul of an ogre. We should mention this to our tribe shaman. Sir Knight looks normal, but the things he does are unimaginably crazy. Even the craziest of our tribe's hunters wouldn't catch a troll like that. If you want to speak without being heard, why not just talk in Eastern language? Johann spoke with a bitter expression. Despite his efforts, these barbarians... Oops. Sir Knight. My apologies. We're not saying Sir Knight is an ogre. Actually, being an ogre would be a compliment. Euclia, that might be misunderstood by Empire people, don't you think? Anyway, Sir Knight. We plan to use poison. Claddagh, trying to recover from the awkward situation, spoke up. Even for these brave Eastern warriors, Johann's method was not an option. I wasn't planning to use my method anyway. I just answered because you asked. Wait. You said you caught a werewolf before. How did you do it then? One was with an arrow and the others. The others? I fought them with blades. The warriors looked at Johann with expression. They murmured in Eastern language, a language Johann barely knew, but he could make out something like. But don't monsters usually resist arrows? There were even humans who could dodge or deflect arrows, let alone monsters. The archery of the centaurs is quite special. Other warriors answered instead. Claddagh, proudly, showed Johann their bow and arrows. The arrows were shorter than usual, equipped with an additional small arrow. Sir Knight. Do you know how to use this? Perhaps you insert the arrow in the addition and then only shoot the arrow? What? Claddagh was surprised. This archery technique, called solinarian, was a traditional skill passed down among centaur tribes. A technique dating back to the ancient empire era, so revered that the centaur's enemies feared it as. But Johann knew what it was. A technique of archery that increases range and speed by reducing the size of the arrow. Seeing the small arrow placed on the addition, Johann was sure of it. Claddagh was amazed when Johann immediately guessed correctly. He had never seen anyone from the Empire recognize it before. Do you also know how to use it? No, not that. Seeing that you recognize it, you must have a talent. Why don't you try learning it? You're not good at shooting bows, remember? No, is it my fault that you chose a spear over a bow? Keep this up, and it'll relay exactly what you're saying. Anyway, Sir Knight. We've been hunting werewolves with this. Seeing how confident Aclada and the other warriors were, it seemed they weren't new to hunting. Indeed, a smaller arrow that flies swiftly like a shot arrow would be hard to react to compared to other arrows. I understand the method of hunting, but shouldn't we first find out where they are? Sir Knight, do you know what means in the ancient imperial language? Born hunter? Why do you already know what I'm about to say, Sir Knight? Aclada said with a slightly deflated expression. There are hunters in our tribe, Sir Knight. Since you asked to find the werewolf pack, they should be tracking them by now. Let's go to a nearby village and rest until we get news, then we'll depart. I see. The trial of a knight wandering the borderlands alone, seeking glory as the Duke had described, never existed. The Duke himself probably didn't believe in it. The warriors of the nomadic tribes and the knights of the empire used whatever means necessary, each in their own way. Only the gathered crowds were unaware of this and cheered. Aclada's predictions turned out to be accurate. The warriors who joined hands with the empire's knights mostly had ulterior motives. The tribal warriors received a hefty sum, but they never intended to conduct a fair deal from the start. To them, empire knights were easy targets to exploit. A warrior who receives a knighthood from the Duke would be a member of a fairly significant tribe. As soon as they got away, they summoned their tribal warriors and turned the tables, threatening the others. Chapter 84.2. Many knights fell for the warm hospitality of the nomadic tribes. However, not all knights were deceived. The warrior thought to himself. He was a warrior who had taken money from the Petrio family's Bariska. Of course, he had no intention of keeping the promise either. But Sir Bariska was really late. Ah. Sorry, sir. It took longer to return, avoiding people's eyes. Bariska's actions were so audacious that even warriors outside the empire were amazed. He even hired mercenaries separately to call them out. Even if some leniency was expected, this was an outright disregard for the Duke's orders. If caught, it could lead to not just embarrassment but also the revocation of his knighthood. But Bariska didn't bat an eye. He was burning with the desire and anger to regain his lost reputation. It was ridiculous he fell off his horse in the tournament when he should have shone. Unlike Lucas, who fought honorably, he fell early and had no such consolation. If he couldn't make up for it in this hunt, he might never recover. What I asked for? Of course, I brought it. A ranger from the east. You can trust his skills. The mercenaries of the Arrowhead group were not intimidated even in front of the knights. Mercenaries from the east are known to be especially rough, being a mix of empire people and barbarians, but these were exceptionally violent. The knights behind Bariska looked at the mercenaries with complex expressions. They had followed because they were originally with Bariska, but not everyone was in favor of this hire. Some visibly disapproved of hiring such mercenaries, thinking it dishonorable. Originally, they might have drawn swords in anger, but Bariska let it pass. After all, they needed the help of both the knights and the mercenaries. My name is Galambos, sir. I see. You're a ranger from the east? Yes, I was a captain. I heard a wyvern can be found around here. Do you think that's true? At Bariska's words, Galambos smirked. Hardly. In such plains where only low hills and mounds are visible, it's hard to find. The mountain ranges are days away. Is that so? Then it was a lie. Damn it. Realizing he was caught, the warrior drew his weapon. He hadn't expected the mercenaries to be compared like this. But the mercenaries were prepared. As soon as the warrior drew his weapon, crossbow bolts flew, piercing him in several places. He fell, writhing in pain. Get rid of that barbarian's corpse. You said your name was Galambos, right? You should have brought good news. Is there any monster nearby worth catching? Galambos nodded with a sly smile. He had a reason to believe, which is why he had come to this night. I heard rumors of centaurs. Sir Knight might be interested. Nomadic tribes didn't stay in one place forever. When the time came, they moved with their livestock. The human tribe called in Eastern language warmly welcomed Johann and Aclada's party. Troll? Troll. Can we stop talking about trolls? It's too entertaining, Sir Knight. Have a drink. The hunters should be back in a couple of days. You can rest until then. Euclia clung to Johan's side, continuously pouring a drink made from livestock milk. The sweet drink went down easily. The tribe applauded, amazed at Johan's ability to drink without getting drunk. Troll Slayer. Troll Slayer. Learning to pronounce Troll Slayer in Eastern language, Johan enjoyed their hospitality. What's the point of getting drunk? During the feast, Johan stepped outside the tent. He desperately needed some cool air due to the heat. The sound of grass rustling in the wind reached his ears. This rhythmic sound made Johan nod his head in enjoyment. Something seemed off to Johan, prompting him to turn his head. He realized that given the season, the grass shouldn't have been long enough to make such noise. Suddenly, he remembered Kegel, an assassin who boasted about various methods of infiltrating enemy lines. From using the environment for camouflage to using people, Kegel had enthusiastically discussed all kinds of methods. He spoke strongly, believing Johan wouldn't use them otherwise. Though Johan had not used them to the extent that it seemed pointless to have mentioned them. Such brutal tasks were not common. This didn't mean Johan lived a calm and peaceful life, however. Johan walked towards the source of the sound and locked eyes with a man who looked like a tribesman. The man twitched upon seeing Johan. His expression didn't change, but Johan could feel that he was startled. "Who are you?" "Oh my. Are you the new Sir Knight?" "I might have had a bit too much to drink." The man staggered as if drunk, with dirt on his hands and legs, suggesting he might have fallen. It was normal to be startled by someone in the dark. Moreover, Johan didn't look like the other tribe's people. Suddenly, a thought crossed Johan's mind. He spoke in the Eastern tongue. Johan smiled broadly. Then, he abruptly grabbed the man's throat. What kind of tribesman doesn't understand his own insults? The man panicked and tried to draw a dagger, but Johan slapped him across the face with his other hand, knocking him out in one blow. "Intruder! Intruder!" Johan's shout awakened the people. The tribe's people stopped drinking and ran out with their weapons. "Where's the intruder?" "Caught him here." "Is he one of your tribe?" The people who saw the man Johan caught scrutinized him with torches. He looked vaguely familiar. Clearly looks like a man from the West. "No, Sir Knight. This man is a knight dastard who was in the tournament." One of the warriors recognized the man's face. Johan exclaimed in surprise. "What? I was surprised too. How did he end up here? Too weak for a knight, isn't he? Couldn't even take one hit. But more importantly, shouldn't we be wondering why he's here?" "That's a good point. Wake him up,